Okay. Thank you again, everyone, for joining in. It is 12:04 Eastern Time. This is just a quick lunch and learn. I appreciate you joining in and allowing me to show you some of the tools that we've been working on. And in fact, this module is a part of a larger auditing program or auditing series that we have. We have a 4-day series, and this is one of the modules in it. We've updated this quite a bit over the last, I don't know, 2 to 3 years. We still continue to polish it a bit, but we've made some big updates based on standard requirements associated with the 9001 2015 upgrade and also the IATF 16949 upgrade. So I'm going to lay a little bit of ground rules here first, just for housekeeping purposes. Again, if you could use your name under your little login profile, if yours is not your first name, you can, I think, just right click and put your name down so that I can respond to you directly. Keep your phone on mute. Sounds like everyone's pretty much on mute, nice and quiet, which is great. If you do have a question, feel free to jump in, unmute your phone or your VoIP and ask the question. This is a pretty informal session. I want to make sure that I can answer your question, but I will also save time at the end for some question and answer. The session is being recorded, so if you want to look at this, watch the recording or pass it on to someone else after the session's over, please feel free to do so. We'll also have it posted on our website at concentricglobal.co, as well as on our YouTube channel. So let me pause briefly just to introduce myself. My name is Jim Thompson. I'm actually recording from Charlotte. I'm up visiting a client today and have paused to have this webinar. So I appreciate you joining in. I've been with Concentric since February 1st, 2003, and I'm also a lead auditor, an exemplary global QMS lead auditor. So I go in at times and audit companies for registration, that sort of thing. So that's a little bit about me. Our offices are located in Charleston, South Carolina, but we have subject matter experts really all over the globe. So thanks again for joining in, and pleased that you're here. And let's, without further ado, jump in to the presentation. So I was actually here in Charlotte. I was driving back to Indianapolis, and I had a bit of an aha moment. I was driving from Charlotte up to Indianapolis. It was about 7 p.m. I was going through the mountains, and I was listening to a TED Talk, and I really got super pumped up, so pumped up that I actually watched the TED Talk or listened to the TED Talk again. And the TED Talk was about the importance of systems and how expertise has increased quite dramatically, and everyone really in this particular scenario in the medical world has turned into specialists, and how that's great that we have all of these specialties and unique disciplines and skill sets, but with that enhanced knowledge becomes the need for having an advanced system. And so my aha moment was based on this concept of a management system architect, really having a design of a management system that could tie everything together. So to point you to what inspired me and prompted the aha moment, the TED Talk was given by a gentleman by the name of Dr. Atul Gawande. He's a Harvard graduate, Harvard Medical School surgeon, and he's also a speaker. And his topic was related to how do we heal medicine? And one of the things that was pointed out during the TED Talk is the value of simple tools. In this particular case, he was able to show that some of the testing that he and his colleagues had done yielded a almost 50% reduction in deaths associated with surgery amongst 7 hospitals, simply by following some basic protocol and the use of tools. In this particular case, the tool was a checklist. So it was really a great aha moment for me. And one of the things that he pointed out was this traditional approach versus a process or a system approach to working in teams. And one of the things that we see, and this is actually an illustration that came out of a guidance document for quality management systems. It was in one of the ASQ publications several years back. But you can see that there's a big difference in the shape and the overall flow of the organization on the left and the organization on the right. So for example, let me get my little spotlight here. So the folks that are on the team here are partitioned off, and their focus really is only on this functional silo in Department C. So they're basically really looking to please this individual here, which is probably their boss. And there's not a lot of visibility across the organization. You kind of get stuck in this functional silo, and once your portion of the job is done, then you're finished, and you really don't have much sight of the customer at the end of the process. Versus this illustration on the right, where it's much more of a process-based approach, and you can see that the walls are down. There's still functional departments, Department A, B, C, D, but the focus is on getting the product or the service through the organization, and there's some freedom back here in the back where the resources, in this case people, can be shifted to where the resources are needed. The focus is on input, process, output, and effectiveness and efficiency of outputs. So what we have done, we have created a suite of tools. Everyone hears only what he understands. John Wolfgang von Goethe is the individual that that quotation comes from. So everyone hears what he understands. And one of the things that I've seen across the board as it relates to working with organizations, working with companies that I do auditing or consulting work with is there are too many quality practitioners out there that are handing down demands to process owner, top management, other department managers, and what they're saying is basically, here's a standard. Here's this international standard here that's been published. It's 30-some pages. There's going to be an audit coming up. Go get ready. And that's really not understood by the individual that has a process to manage. So what we've done is we've put together a suite of tools that helps each individual that has responsibility for managing a process. These tools can be used to master the processes that he or she is supposed to manage. So if you give folks the right tools, then they'll be very, very successful. If you don't, then you may continue to struggle to get by it. How do you get there if you don't know where you're going? So here's the suite of tools. It's 12 tools, and as you'll be able to see, let me get my little laser pointer out again. The the direction in which these tools are laid out are tool 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, so starting in the middle. And you also see that over on the left-hand side here, you have plan, do, check, and act. So each row indicates tools that are used to support either plan, do, check, or act activities within the organization. So tool number 1, and this tool is a tool it's very simple. It's something that has been asked for years. It addresses the very first handful of clauses that are in the standard, and that is the interaction of processes map. So this is tool number 1. In this particular case, what we're using is an example of a fake company called the Acme Box Company. And at the Acme Box Company, there are processes that are value added, you can see in the middle, and then there are processes around the value added processes that are support, and then you have process 10 and 11, monitoring and measurement and continual improvement down at the bottom. So right out of the bat, the first thing that you need to do, especially with regard to the 2015 changes and the 2016 changes, is you have to identify who you are as an organization and identify what the standards are calling the context of the organization. So what are all the parts? What are all the pieces to your organization when you say to the marketplace, here's who we are, we are certified, or we are registered, or we provide superior products and services. What do you mean? What are all the pieces to your organization? In this case, this organization has 11 distinct processes. So we move on to number 2, tool number 2, which is the process ownership chart. And what this tool is used for, it's used to identify which leader owns which of the 11 processes. So, for example, you have Jim Schultz, who's the president. Jim owns process 5 and process 11. So Jim is responsible for the compliance of that process. Jim is responsible for the performance of that process, reporting on the performance of that process. So right off the bat, what we've done is we've defined, using these tools, what the organization actually is, what are all the parts of the organization, and who owns each piece of that organization. Now, tool 3 is one of the more complex tools, and this is called the Applicability Matrix. In the automotive world, one of the things that has been a tool that's been required by most of the registrars is something like this, and typically it's called an applicability matrix. And what that does is the applicability matrix is really a conversion tool. So let's imagine here that these are the processes of my management system. In this particular case, there's 18 processes, but let's imagine it's 11 based on our Acme Box Company. And you're the process owner for process number 7. First things first, this particular example, we have Katahdin Global Operations. So this applicability matrix is key processes by all locations. So this is a conversion tool to help you understand, if you have 14 locations globally, what do each of those locations do? P is primary, S is support or secondary, but for example here, location is location 7. In location 7, there are no processes at this particular location here for process 2, 3, 4, and 5, but there's support that's expected from these locations all across the board. So this helps to connect your multiple global sites or remote locations with the processes of the organization. Now let's go to the next item, which is applicability by clause. So in this particular case, this is a very useful and valuable tool, especially for those process owners that may not have a lot of exposure to the standards. And what this does is there's a conversion here based on requirements. So on the left-hand side, you can see clause 4, clause 4, clause 4, clause 5. And what this tool does is it helps that process owner to understand, okay, look, which part of the standard do I need to pay attention and be knowledgeable on? So for example, in this particular item, if you're the process owner for marketing, well, if you come down here into this lane, you can see that there's a P there. So it's very important that you understand as a primary owner of this clause, 5.1.2, you need to be very familiar with customer focus. What are the standard requirements in that clause? And you need to be willing, able, and ready to demonstrate to the auditor that you understand what the requirements are and that you're meeting and fulfilling those requirements related to clause 5.1.2. This is a much better approach than, let's say, throwing a standard at a manager and saying, good luck, be prepared for the audit, read this thing and decipher what is required within your portion of responsibility. That's just not a very fair way to set up leadership to embrace their piece of the management system and to really, it doesn't do you well in your quest to try to disseminate responsibility and ownership of the management system out to those natural process owners, and that's what you want to encourage. Okay. So I'm going to pause right there for just a second. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to open up the gallery view, and I'm going to see if there are any questions up to this point. Anybody have any questions? There's a couple of chats here, so let me see. I can't see anything. This is Steve Clayton. Hey, Sydney, thanks for sharing the event. Seems very interesting. Got it. Steve, I hope you're able to view now. If not, it may be due to firewall restrictions within the network. If you're VPN or on your network, that may be the issue. And somebody with GB344 says user error. That's pretty funny. Steve's a good guy. Come on. Jim, explain that the model can be applied regardless of the requirement for 9001. Absolutely. Very good point. This model, there are a lot of customers that we work with actually that they have no intent at all to go through third-party certification or registration. So this becomes a very valuable and simple method to deploy within an organization. And where I've seen it work probably of most value is when a company is getting too big to act like a small company. Tribal knowledge doesn't work anymore. Maybe it's a mom and pop shop that has expanded and must now act like a large and real company. So Sydney said the model can be used to any size of any organization in any industry, and that is true. The other thing is any sector. So if you're working on managing multiple certifications, multiple standards, multiple management systems, this is a great tool for you, especially working and applying that applicability matrix, because look, you may be a process owner for material management, and you have to now understand what are the requirements for not only a quality system, but what are the requirements for, let's say, Sarbanes-Oxley, or the requirements for environmental management systems, or what's coming up later this year is the ISO 45001 Occupational Health and Safety Standard. Currently it's the 18001. But, you know, when you're juggling so many requirements, it's not sufficient enough as the, you know, management representatives or the company auditors to just throw the standards at your management staff and say, good luck, we have an audit coming up. It's just not fair. So it's a very good foundation for building organizational excellence, and it's simple to deploy. And I'm not saying that just because you know, I'm beating the ISO drum. I'm saying this because what we've seen over the past half dozen years in particular is that telling people within organizations what they have to do just doesn't work, but giving them tools on how to execute requirements and how to optimize their processes works very, very well. So let me go back over here to the presentation. Thank you guys for the comments, for those of you that shared some of your input. The next one, so tool number 4, this one is really interesting because this is a tool that really elicits a lot of like quality dork anger. People get really mad and really passionate about turtle diagrams versus SIPOC diagrams, and it's kind of like a turf war between the turtle diagram people and the SIPOC diagram people. Personally, I think what we need to do is create something that you know, involves peace and unity, kind of like the Bloods and the Crips got together and you know, stopped fighting. And what they did is they said, hey, you know, let's put down our weapons, and maybe we should do the same thing. And instead of turtle versus SIPOC, we should call it like a Tupac diagram. I think we should maybe work on that. So I'll put that in the arsenal for further development. Tupac diagrams, I like it. But it's pretty simple. A turtle diagram is nothing more than a one-page process map at a very high level, so that the process owners that you've identified in tool number 2 have a really basic 50,000-foot view or 5,000-foot view, I guess you could say, of the process that they're supposed to be managing. So it's very simple. Inputs, you got your processes and your outputs. So that's the main lane, is what are the key inputs and the key outputs of the process that you're managing. The reason why I like the turtle diagram in particular is because it's one thing to define what key inputs and outputs are, but what the yellow boxes on the outside do is they define further what resources do you need in order to actually have a chance at properly achieving the desired output. So what is the key equipment that you depend on? If you're a materials manager, maybe key equipment would be something like SAP or some ERP program, so that you can understand how much inventory you have. So that type of stuff goes there. How? So this section is further documentation, further standard operating procedures, work instructions, any key documents that become kind of the jump off point from this one-page diagram down to more specific procedures or work instructions. You want to list those here. Then the next one is who. So who on your team are you dependent on in order to execute this particular process? Again, if you're in materials or if you're in purchasing, you rely on competencies and individuals that are perhaps not in the materials department. You may be relying on IT, you may be relying on maintenance or production personnel. So that's where you would put that. And then to me, one of the most important and also the most difficult parts of this tool is criteria. So what is the criteria in which you measure this process output? And the criteria should be measurable. And the criteria should also be listed in what are the methods of measurement, not specifically, let's just say that you had criteria for being healthy. You wanted to be healthier in 2017. Well, what I would recommend is under criteria, put lose weight or maintain weight or something like that, and put it in number of pounds lost or within a percentage of ideal weight, something like that. Don't actually put the real number, because similar to other higher up documents in your management system, you don't want to be changing the turtle diagram every other week. You want that to stay fairly static. That becomes kind of the top level document for that individual process. And so you want to put the method of measure and then allow for putting, 5 pounds or 7 pounds or 2 pounds or whatever on another tool. And that comes up in tool number 7. So turtle diagram, tool number 4. Tool number 5, we've made some changes recently to tool 5 and 6. Tool 5 has been consolidated for documents and records. It used to be you had documents on the left and records on the right, but with an increase of importance in competency and training, we've consolidated documents and records. And the standard, the 9001 and IATF standard, have also consolidated the terminology, and they refer to it as documented information, which I don't like, but that's a whole nother webinar and complaint session. But let's look at tool number 5. So the idea here is that you have a tool that helps you to at least understand what are all the documents that need to be controlled. And in this particular case, let's see here, you've got, let's say hey, Cummins, you made the board, Cummins Supplier Handbook, Rev 5, and this is the revision date. You want to make sure that you're using the most pertinent version and that you're keeping track of the document distribution and the locations where those documents are distributed, so that, for example, if this document is updated to Rev 6, you can go and update the master. There's one located here, there's 2 in the engineering office, and then 1 in the sales office. So that's what these numbering, what this numbering scheme is about. It's related to the number of these documents at this location. So pretty simple to follow. Same thing goes for records. So one of the things that we've done, we've updated this tool. In the 9001:2015 standard, there are actually 21 required records. So this is a good starting point to ensure that, here are all of the clauses with a statement saying documented information needed to be retained for providing some sort of evidence, has to at least be these 21 records. And here are the actual requirements from the standard. And then you can use the rest of this form to show, okay, for, let's just say for this one right here, the 4th record, competency of people. So a record, let's say a training record, is probably what that's looking for. So what do you call it? Do you call it a training record? Do you call it a new employee orientation packet? Where's it stored? How's it retrieved? What's the retention min-max? Although it doesn't state min-max in the standard, but typically we see what's the minimum and maximum retention time. and then disposition. How do you get rid of that record? If you want to dig down deeper in the documentation, documented information requirement, there is a link here. I know it might be a little bit hard to see because it's a rather long link, but just go onto our website, concentricglobal.co. Then under the search feature, just put in ISO 9001:2015 documentation requirements. You can also Google it. I think we're coming up pretty close towards the top. We're definitely within the first page or two. But you'll see a full white paper that Sydney and I created. You also see a whole slew of tools and checklists, and this thing is in Excel, so you can download it and use that. And, that tool there is also in Excel. So concentricglobal.co, and then just search for ISO 9001:2015 documentation requirements. But that's tool number 5. Tool number 6, competency tracker. So this one's really cool. I saw an example of this at an automotive company in Kokomo, Indiana, probably over 10 years ago. They had this this deal called a training passport, or just this concept of a passport. And I really, really liked it, and I've deployed it at several different companies. But what I really like about this is it takes each team member, it gives them, here's a photo, here's the name, Miss Suzanne Greenberg, customer service rep, data buyer, and then these are the different processes here or procedures that she's been trained on, or the depth of her competency. So in this particular case, ERP, she went through training, she's able to work on her own, or work with guidance, work on her own, and then finally she's so qualified that she can be a trainer. Okay, so where I've seen this as a best practice is individuals will have either a magnetic tape on the back so that they can actually stick this passport to a piece of equipment, or they have a pegboard where they can hang their passports, and you could go up at any time and see what that individual is qualified to do in terms of performance on different machines or operations. And the way that this passport thing works is when you get a record, let's say for being qualified as a trainer, you take your records into, let's say, a training coordinator's office, give them that paperwork, and then that training coordinator has a hole punch similar to a customs officer, and you get your this cell punched in exchange for the documentation that's then put in that individual's personnel or training file. So the other piece of this that I think is important is to have a consolidated competency matrix. So the one on the left is for individual tracking, and the one on the right is an accumulative tracking tool for all of the individuals in that particular work cell, work area, work center, what have you. Now, what I love about this is you can see across the board who's qualified in what. You can also see which operations have a significant amount of competency or folks qualified to perform that operation versus those that may be at high risk. So looking at SOP number 1, for example, there are several people that work in that process, but there's a concern there where there's no trainer. Or this one, SOP number 2, there's only 2 people that are competent. Or SOP number 3, again, there's no trainer. So I really like this because it helps you not only keep track of competencies, but it helps you in identifying where your weak points are. And if an individual leaves and that person is the only qualified trainer, this tracking tool helps you identify that rather quickly. So I'm going to stop sharing again, since we've gone through the do lane, and let's look again at some questions. So a couple questions here. Most documents are online these days. Would this tool still be needed? and an online web-based system. If you're talking about, so Denholm, if you're talking specifically about the master list or the master document list, you're right. You may not need, you may have software. It could be anywhere from SharePoint software to something more complex like a quality management system software that would tell you in a view what your master documents are. So in that particular case, you're right, you may not need a tool like that. So very good point. These tools are very, very useful primarily for small to mid-sized businesses or those companies that maybe don't have the capital to put towards software, or there are some companies that specifically the Japanese that are very they're very tool heavy, but they're very apprehensive when it comes to software. But that is a good question. Here's another one: how to keep it up to date? Who's responsible for that? Is it HR? Very good question. So to answer that question, you have to really go back to tool number one, which is all of the processes in your management system. Then move to tool number two. Tool number two is identify who would be the process owner for training or for employee competencies and that sort of thing. So whoever you identified in process number two would probably be the individual that's responsible for that passport or competency matrix type tool maintenance or program. So awesome question. Thank you guys. I appreciate that. All right, let's jump back over here now to sharing the screen again. Tool number 7. This is one of my favorite tools. I love this tool. It is a process measures dashboard. So see if you can follow me here. If you recall, on the bottom right-hand side of each turtle diagram, so again, if you have 11 processes in tool number 1, then you'd have 11 turtle diagrams. And all 11 turtle diagrams would have process performance indicators for that process in the bottom right. So what the process measures dashboard is, it's nothing more than an aggregate of all of the metrics on each of the turtles, which I think is pretty cool. So let's jump in here. So up here on the top, you have key performance indicators that are, for, let's say, an entire site. They're at a plant level. They're at a, executive management level. It might be how the overall performance of the company is evaluated. In this particular case, this is fairly shallow because it's only measuring overall company goals in terms of revenue and profitability. But bear with me in this example. Ideally, you'd have safety, quality, cost, delivery, morale, environment, those types of overall organizational excellence KPIs up there. So those are your KPIs. And then down here, what are called the PPIs. So the PPIs are the process performance indicators. And so what you have is right here in this lane here, you have the method of measurement, which comes from the bottom right-hand box of the turtle diagram. And then you have the process 1 through 11 here, which we've seen in tool 1, 2, 3, so on and so forth. And then over here, you have performance metrics versus actual measures. In this example, you have this scorecard that's being used to evaluate performance quarterly. My recommendation is that you maybe start quarterly and then look at what can you measure on a monthly basis. Quarterly is pretty pretty infrequent, especially if you're trying to make a quick adjustment based on poor performance. But then anything that's yellow and especially red, you should see something over here in the action registry showing some sort of action, either tracking the action here or a reference to a corrective action or a special project, something like that. And what I really like down here at the bottom is you can see, you can come up with your own scoring mechanism, but in this case, total points possible is 27, and in this case, the total points that were green out of 27 gave the overall QMS health score a 44. And I've seen where organizations have taken this and they track on a monthly basis, is their overall QMS score going up or is it going down? That sort of thing. So let's break this down a little bit further in this particular slide. So right here you have the aggregate of criteria, or the criteria field from each turtle diagram. There's your high level goal, which is your KPI. This is customer loyalty with goals really translated into a local language, a language that those folks that are involved in that process could understand. And then you have off to the right, monitoring of process output versus objectives, and then tracking of action. In this particular case, CAPA 064 was a project that's Diversified Customer Mix Project. That was the name of the project. That was the project that helped this particular performance indicator get from, a red to green. So that's just one example of the use of the process measures dashboard. Now, one of the other things that you'll notice is the lines, the arrows here kind of go from the center tool out, except for with respect to this check lane. And the idea here is that there should be a very clear connection between your process measures dashboard and your auditing activity. There should be a direct connection with your process measures dashboard and your management review activity. And let me dig down a little deeper into that. So, for example, if your process measures dashboard is showing that you're just doing a horrible job as it relates to infrastructure, then perhaps you don't want to wait until October to audit infrastructure. If your metrics are performing or showing poor performance, then you need to bump that up. So there should be alignment again between your process measures dashboard, your yellows and your reds, and your frequency and schedule of auditing activity. So that's point number one. Point number two is I really love this tool because what it does is it allows you to develop an annual audit schedule, which on the automotive side, you have to have an annual audit schedule. And it allows you to use, again, kind of a PDCA approach. So the audit's been scheduled or planned, the audit's been done, corrective action's been requested, and once that corrective action's closed, then you'd have kind of all four boxes closed out. You could also use this to show, in this example up here in product design, in February, the audit was scheduled, but never happened, and it's March now, or maybe it's May now. So you can show, hey, there's one that was scheduled and we never did it. Same with monitoring and measurement down here. And then you can also see where audits maybe were originally scheduled for January and they were moved up and rescheduled for March. So there's a bunch of different ways you can use this, but at the end of the day, one page and one very clear tool really, really helps. One other bit here. So this shows that in this particular example that 2 corrective actions were issued and 0 have been actually addressed, and the due date's coming up. Maybe it's coming up at the end of that month or whatever. This one, it shows there was 1 corrective action issued and that 1 corrective action was closed, so you're fine. And you can play with this tool however you want. There's a bunch of different ways you can use it, but that's just one example. In a similar fashion, same thing on the management review tracker side. So for those of you that are in the ISO 9001 2015 world, these are the 11 required inputs to management review. So there are a few more requirements now than in the 2018 or 2008 version. On the IATF 16949 side, there are 22 inputs that are required in management review. So our tool for this actually shows one tab for QMS and a second tab that also has, you know, the other 11 required inputs for the IATF or automotive management review inputs. So I like this as well. This again should be connected to your process measures dashboard. There should be, you know, some connectivity. If you're performing horribly in some of these metrics, then you should probably bump up the frequency in which you review those in management review. So the way that this tool is used is that the boxes equal week 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so you can look at this and say, on customer feedback, we want to look at customer feedback in week 1 and week 3 of the month. And if you did that in January, then you get a green and a green. But let's say oops, we forgot to look at customer scorecards or customer feedback, then you might give yourself a red and a red. So there's all kinds of ways to use this thing, but this is just one way to do it. And again, one page, very visual, very easy for people to understand. You can explain it in 10 minutes, and folks would be able to use it and deploy it throughout the organization. So again, I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to give a moment for folks to chime in. We've gone through the plan, the do, and the check tools. So we have 9 tools down and 3 to go. So any questions? So far, so good. Let me see, there's a couple. So we're using a similar process, but to keep the supervisors and trainers have to keep their areas up to date. Yeah, so Pam, I think you're talking about the competency matrix, is that right? And the kind of the training tracker side of things. But irrespective if it's a dashboard or if it is a training tracker, that's what we want. We want you as management system architects to design and deploy these tools to roll them out so that you have as many people actually using them as possible. So you create the framework, then you can build off of the management system architect tools that we have and dial them in to where they fit your organization, teach others how to use it. And it's really interesting because what you're doing, it's kind of like gummy worm vitamins for my kids. I used to, and I take them as well. I don't like the really big, nasty, bitter pills or vitamins, but give me a piece of candy and hide the vitamins inside, and all of a sudden, I'm going to take it every single day. This is a similar deal. You're really hiding requirements of the standards inside the tools. People are complying with standard requirements without even knowing. There's another question. So, can this tool help documenting the training effectiveness verification? Yes. Are you talking about the tool number 6, which is the training matrix? Yes. So the answer to your question, so the question again is, can the tool, let me pull this up. So can this tool here help with respect to training verification? And yes, so the way that this can be used to ensure that someone is fully trained and validated prior to them working on a particular process or on a particular machine. Similar to customs, you can't come into the country, you can't get your passport stamped until you show me the records that you, your trainer, your supervisor, whoever you're shadowing, that individual has also signed off. I saw in one of our clients where when you moved to a machine, you took your passport with you and you stuck your passport, which had a magnet on the back, to the machine so that anybody walking by could clearly see that you were qualified and to what depth you were qualified to actually work on that machine. One of the other things that it did is it identified who was responsible for 5S of that machine, who's responsible for first level maintenance and cleanup and that sort of thing. So good question, thank you. So now we're going to move on to the ACT section. So action tracker. I love this. This used to be called the problem resolution log and the corrective action log, and I don't like that. I like that it's called action tracker because this is all encompassing for any type of action that you need to take, be it a corrective action, be it a risk avoidance, or maybe even just an idea. Somebody has an idea for improvement. So get all of your actions into this hopper. And the idea is to look at this similar to a funnel. Look at those things that are high impact and high priority, and then classify them in a way to say, okay, this particular item here needs to have a corrective action issue. This one needs to have some sort of risk management project. This item here is a just do it. If it's just going to take a couple hours, keep it on this particular log and let it live and die or become open and closed just on this tracker. Nothing else needs to happen to it. But for those things that might be a massive project, like this top one here, it's a 40+ hour workload to get this particular issue closed out, and maybe that's a Six Sigma project or, again, some other special project. And then this tracks what the status of all of your actions are. So on the left-hand side, this would be the type of action that would be proactive. So risk management, doing a SWOT analysis or the use of an FMEA, and then ranking what the risk priority is and taking action before something gets out of control. So this is more the proactive side. We're seeing both on 9001, 2015, and also with IATF 16949, more and more focus being put on taking time and resources to do evaluation of risk, management of risk, looking as auditors at what could potentially be a risk, and then evaluating deliberately whether or not you're going to take action against that risk. Okay, so that's on the left-hand side. Then the right-hand side is kind of your traditional corrective action. I love this form too. It's very, very in-depth. It drives the right behavior. This is what we call the ultimate corrective action report. If you're interested in looking at this in more detail, I'd be happy to show it to you. And then obviously some things are bigger than a corrective action report or corrective action request. Some things might be a Six Sigma project, a value stream mapping, Kaizen event, capital improvement type project. So that would be tool number 12. Okay, so we've gone through all the tools, and let's come back to my aha moment. And it was really this statement that Dr. Blonde had made while I was driving through the mountains of North Carolina. And it was, making systems work is the great task of my generation of physicians and scientists. But I would go further and say making systems work, whether in healthcare, education, climate change, making a pathway out of poverty, is the task of our generation as a whole. So I thought that was a pretty profound statement. we can all be specialists and have all of these fancy latest and greatest technology and that sort of thing. But if the whole organization doesn't work and come together as a whole for the sake of the customer, then we really have challenges ahead of us. And that's really what we're facing now. So a couple more slides and then we'll be out of here. We have a more in-depth live online session similar to this, but it's a 4-hour session in the morning and then another 4-hour session in the afternoon. For those folks that are transitioning into 9001 or IATF 6949, between now and the end of the week, if you register, the registration price for the first session is $147. It's 50% off, and then for both morning and afternoon session for those folks in automotive, it's 50% off. It's $247. So if you're interested in doing the live online training, this is a really great way to learn what's changed in depth in these two standards, and then get some advice on what to do to kind of get you through that initial upgrade or transition audit. And then for those of you that prefer kind of the good old days, face-to-face, in class, we also have a training session in Charleston coming up March 14th through the 17th. This is a 4-day, it's 4 different days. There's a 1-day, 2-day, 3-day, and 4-day pass based on which level of competency you want. So for instance, ITF 6949 lead auditors would come and buy a 4-day pass and come to all 4. But if you have process owners that you want to educate in further detail on how to be prepared for QMS rollout or the QMS upgrade, I would encourage you to have a look at maybe having them come into 1 or maybe even the first 2 days of the training. And this is at the Low Country Graduate Center. This will be in partnership with the Low Country Graduate Center and SCMEP. This is also discounted between now and the end of this week. And for those folks that are working for South Carolina-based companies, there's upwards of 50% off that might be you might be eligible for and subsidized through the state of South Carolina Department of Commerce for this particular class. So if you're interested, send me an email or message me and I'll give you more details about that. But both of these are on our website right here, concentricglobal.co, if you're interested in learning more about the syllabus or agenda costs, or to register. You can find that stuff there. And finally, this is how you can stay connected with me, stay connected to us. So what I want to do is I want to unmute everyone, if I can do so without it being too loud. So if you're at Chick-fil-A going through the drive-thru, we can hear you now. Any questions, comments, ridicules, funny jokes? So we ended up with almost 40 people. I'm gonna mute again, mute all, and go to some of these chat. So great presentation. Thank you. I have to leave. Thank you. Great tools. Da, 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 da. Cool. All right. So a lot of you had to jump off. Sorry for going over a few minutes. I hope it was valuable. It was a nice way for me to spend my lunch. I'm actually going to go and eat myself. Not eat myself, but eat as well. If anyone is interested in this presentation, again, I'll have this posted by the end of the week on our website, and you can find it there, concentricglobal.co. You can also reach out to me anytime, jim.thompson@concentricglobal.co. or Jim Thompson 2001 on just about any social media. So this concludes today's webinar. I thank you guys very much for your input and your great questions and comments. And I look forward to seeing you on the next webinar or in the classroom. So long. Thanks. Have a good week. Be safe, be productive, and we'll see you again soon. See ya.
Thank you, Sam. Bye.
Bye.
We're going.
Ciao. Ta bom. Adios. Arrivederci. Thanks, Dave.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.